Hi, friends. My name is Nikki Zarkin. I am the Community Engagement Manager at Radical Partners. I'm so excited to be here today for our 5th Civic Chat. We're doing a series of chats with community leaders in Miami to ask the hard-hitting questions as we approach this important election season. I'm very excited to be here today with Danielle, Wolfe, and Daniela Cadena from Global Shapers Miami. Hi, both of you. So before we get into the meat of the conversation, because we're going to be doing a conversation about being civically activated no matter where you land on the political spectrum. So to ground ourselves in this conversation, I'd love for each of you to have the opportunity to tell folks out there a little bit more about you, what you do in the community, your day jobs, your side hobbies, all of that. And then what your political leanings are and why and how you got to those beliefs, just so folks can ground themselves as they hear your perspective throughout the conversation. So first off, I'll give it to you, Daniela.
Yeah, so first off, I'm super happy to be here. I think this spaces like this and dialogue like this is what I feel is so different about this 2020 election. I hadn't seen this movement across ages, like groups of people, folks of people, the way we're doing it. So I'm super happy to be part of this. My name's Daniela. For people that know me, Danny is totally okay. I am originally from a beautiful country in South America that has both the Atlantic and the Pacific, a beautiful city in Colombia called Cali, but home has been Miami since I was roughly 6 years old. I went to school in FIU and I did pre-med, hated it, and then dedicated my life to building a career around social entrepreneurship and innovation. And I currently work as the Director of Venture Ready Programs at Startup FIU. So anything that has to do with social entrepreneurship for students at the undergrad and graduate level. And then I'm super happy to be also a global shaper, which is how I know my colleague friend Danielle. And my political views have evolved a lot. I think I lean Republican, but I also have these very foundational beliefs that probably align more with the Democratic Party. I got there because through my work in social entrepreneurship, I understand the inequities in our society and understand that the tough conversations and kind of taking the fold out of that is something that tends to be a conversation that's more in the Democratic Party. That said, I feel like because of my upbringing and because of like the family I had and have, thankfully, they're very entrepreneurial and business oriented. And I think a combination of that and kind of where we come from, I am very fiscally conservative and therefore align a lot with the Republican Party when it comes to that. That being said, I think it's hard to divide Republican and Democrat. I think it's about understanding what pieces of it for the party that we're living in right now, which is very different than a few years back as well. And it will be in a few years moving forward.
I really appreciate your candidness and transparency and vulnerability in sharing that, because I think a lot of people experience that as well. Danielle, I'm gonna pass the mic to you so you can do the same.
Yeah, so my name's Danielle, and I am not a homegrown Miamian. Just like Danny, this was not always my home. In 2017, I moved to Miami from Orlando, and previously I grew up in Indiana. And really here in Miami, I work for United Way of Miami-Dade and community engagement, which is basically connecting people in the community to our mission through curated events. So that could be a volunteer project where folks come out and paint a school, or we connect with youth and do a mentoring program. It all really depends on, the day and what we're working on. As far as my political views, I have always leaned really far Democrat and really liberal. It's been really interesting to see my journey change over time, especially because I come from a very conservative community in Indiana. Mike Pence, our vice president, is from Indiana, and a lot of his policies were enacted when I was in high school. And so I was always around very conservative people. And if I'm being really honest, in the beginning, I was saying that I was a liberal and saying that I was a Democrat just to kind of like stick it to the man, like, oh, all of you guys are very conservative people. I'm going to go the exact opposite. And then when I left for school, I realized, no, that's really where I do lean. And thankfully, my family's always been really supportive of what they think is like super out there ideas of what life would look like. But Danny is an incredible friend and colleague, and I don't think that our political views have ever hindered that relationship one bit. So I'm excited to really dive into this conversation today.
Danielle, I want to pass the mic very quickly back to you just so you can let us know, like, what is Global Shapers?
Yeah, Global Shapers is an initiative from the World Economic Forum that really believes that young people should be at the decision-making table. And so they decided to create Global Shapers in city-based hubs across the world to really understand that locally there are problems that young people can help tackle with a global network of people supporting. So here in Miami, we have an incredible group of like 25 young people under 30 who are looking at Miami through our local lenses and trying to tackle local issues. But the incredible thing about Global Shapers is that some of the issues that Miami is facing are not different to situations and issues that a community over in India might be facing. So we have this global connection where we can reach out to our peers, our young peers across the globe, collaborate with them, and really think of innovative solutions to issues that are happening locally and globally.
Wonderful. That's so awesome. Thank you all for, and both of you and your squad, for all the work that you're doing. And I think it's super telling and super perfect for this conversation, not only that you both are named Danny, but also that you came from very distinct stories, very distinct in different places, and you kind of approach politics in a different way. And yet, just as you said, Danielle, you're still friends, you're still colleagues, and funny enough, you're both in the same organization that are doing wonderful things for the city, working together, collaborating together. And I think that goes to show, right, like, that no matter where we land, we can act on those things and act on those beliefs in a positive way. And so I'm really excited to have both of you here who are coming from different places, coming to the polls, coming to the Miami social impact ecosystem from different places, but you're both civically activating together. And so no matter where you land, right, you have a passion project, you have something you care about in the community. And so I wanted to pass the mic back to Daniela. Tell us, like, what is the particular issue area that you care about in the community?
I would say it's a combination of transit and public housing. And I'll dive into specifically transportation. I guess I got really into this when I started working at FIU, and I was kind of put on a project to build a pilot project out in West Kendall. And I started to understand that, like, read everything I can about that area, the west side of Miami, because most people work east of I-95. So roughly 77% back then, 77% of people that work in downtown live west of the Palmetto. And they're commuting an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, each way. At that, that's roughly 3 hours a day. That's 15 hours a week. That's time away from school, from your kids, from overall mental well-being. That really impacts that. And I've tried to understand why transportation is so keen and a fundamental, I guess, right for citizens in a city like Miami, where we're not such an urban cluster. We think about how suburban we are, right? And our transit system is extremely bus reliant. And so for me, public transportation became a project I wanted to understand. Through my work at Startup FIU now, I do boot camps, and recently we did one on just redesigning public transportation. I did some consulting work with IDEO and Miami-Dade County on that, and just understanding, this kind of lens that, I don't know if it's because of the diversity of our culture here in Miami, but there's this lens of classism in our transit system. And I think that's starting to change a lot with our younger generations that don't want to own cars, that want, it's a combination of things. And for me, that's an issue that's really important for me. It's something that I'm reading a lot about when it comes to the candidates. I've leaned a lot on this amazing organization called Transit Alliance to understand, the work. So if you're interested in understanding, for example, who you're going to vote for mayor, the Transit Alliance did a really thorough report with the candidates, and you can read more about their issues, what their opinions are on the privatization of our highways, on transit. So yeah, that's definitely something that is important to me, and I try to embed it in my work at Startup FIU, but also in like my side hustles or like my pro bono work.
Incredible. I love the passion. I can feel it through the screen. And I know it's difficult to choose one issue area because I'm the same way. But Danielle, tell us what is I know the one or maybe the few issue areas that you're passionate about, and like what makes you passionate about them.
Yeah, I'm actually going to say climate change is something really top of mind for me. And not just because I live here in Miami and we're all seeing the impacts of climate change here being on the front lines, but I think about like where I come from and my roots. And Indiana has a terrible reputation for being a big polluter. I literally grew up in what is called the Rust Belt, and that's just because of all the manufacturing that happened in Indiana. So really, when I think about climate change and why it drives me to vote the way that I do, it's really because we're seeing the impacts in my family, seeing the impacts on all of those big polluters. Indiana still has coal-fired plants, that are known for causing huge issues with air quality and just pushing all of these terrible pollutants into the air. My family is really close to Lake Michigan, and Lake Michigan is known as like one of the most polluted Great Lakes. Millions of pounds of plastic is dumped into Lake Michigan every single year. And so growing up, I never really even heard of climate change. No one really talked about it. There were climate change deniers, sure. It wasn't really until I came to Miami and really until I joined Global Shapers that I even had any idea of the sheer crisis that we are going to be stepping into. Like I really had no idea. And so it was really starting to educate myself slowly after moving to Miami and really seeing the impacts here locally now. I mean, we're seeing hurricanes happening more frequently and they're becoming more powerful every single year. Obviously the flooding is happening. There are all of these things, even fish kills because of water pollutants. So, in Miami, we are on the front lines. And so over the past couple of years, I've really tried to educate myself, coming from really nothing. And through Global Shapers, I've had opportunities to go to trainings and really get an inside look and really in-depth trainings and opportunities to come back to the city and support in different ways. And so when I'm looking at, this election, I already voted, but when I was planning on voting and I was looking at everyone, whether or not it was local or in the presidential, I was really trying to see who is going to put climate change top of mind, because I don't think that we have a lot of time to wait.
So, right, using this issue area that you care about as an example, or kind of a straw man example, right, like what can folks do to rally around something they care about?
Becoming civically engaged and becoming educated on topics that you're passionate about is all a journey. Like there are very few people that I would consider experts in these fields. And a lot of times they think that we can feel really intimidated by having to make these decisions, and voting can feel so intimidating. So how can I learn all of this information? And really, I think it's just like day by day, small bites, finding those organizations locally that you feel aligned with, and then doing independent research. Find a good author, find a good book, find a YouTube video or a TED Talk that can really help you figure out your personal journey with this, because some of these issues are so big and so vast. And I think of climate change because I was just mentioning it. There are so many pieces to climate change, but maybe you're just really passionate about oceans and you're really passionate about, reducing single-use plastics. And so really, if you figure out what your, single view can be, you can really dive deep into it, because if you try and eat the whole cake at once, you're going to choke. So you really have to start with slices and really figure out slowly, what's the most important thing for you right now, and learning all that you can about that. And that's going to start leading you towards, people who make policy that is aligned with your views. So I think you always have to start